For those of you who follow this channel, you know that I don't really discuss politics ever. In fact, I think politics is best left out of most of life's endeavors. This is a little different than my normal post, but I wanted to stop and ask you the question, do you think the Washington Post wants you to stay poor? Or more importantly, do you think the media wants you to stay poor? Now, before we get into this, I'm going to tell a little bit of a backstory to explain where I'm coming from, and then I'll show you the two different articles I saw this week that really kind of brought this out and why I wanted to voice my opinion on this matter. For those of you that follow me on social media, you probably saw that over the last week I was at FinCon, which is the financial convention where money and media meet, and essentially it's for bloggers, podcasters, YouTubers in the personal finance, entrepreneurship space. Awesome conference, one of the best conferences I've ever been to, and I absolutely love it. I went for the first time last year, and then I obviously went again this year, and I already bought my ticket for next year. And something a little funny happened this year, but I didn't really realize what it was at the time, but now it all makes sense. So this year I paid for a pro networking pass. One of the perks of this pro networking pass is that on day 2 you got like a 2-hour window of 10-minute increments to meet with brands. So you could sit in front of them, hear about what they do, hear about their affiliate programs, hear about how you can help them, hear about how they can help you. I got to meet some really, really cool brands, but that's not the point of this conversation. Neither is the fact that on day 2, I was actually fairly hungover and probably not my best networking first thing in the morning. But after a few different networking sessions, I went to meet with this company, which I'm not going to name here, but there were 2 ladies sitting down to talk. So it was like one-on-one, right? So you scheduled with a certain person in that company. So the gentleman that I was supposed to speak with was talking to 2 different ladies, which not a big deal, but kind of odd. There were 2 instead of just 1 because they were kind of one-on-one sessions. And as I approached the table, there was a FinCon volunteer there who asked which table I was going to, and I pointed at the company. At which point she essentially proceeded to say, "Oh, good," and kick the 2 ladies out, right? Like she kind of, it was kind of awkward for me because I was like, "Oh, whoa," like, hey, it's cool if they're going a little bit over, if they're in a good conversation. Yeah, I don't want to interrupt. So then I come and I sit down at the table and I go to talk to the guy, and I stuck up the conversation by kind of joking about how the little awkward, trying to make it a little bit less tense. And I joked, I was like, "Man, the FinCon police are out in droves this year. They're strict." I cracked the joke. We laughed a little bit. Awkwardness over. By the way, great tip for networking. If there's kind of an elephant in the room situation, crack a joke about it. Everybody moves on. Way better than being awkward about it. We sit down. We had our conversation. I talked to them a couple other times. I've been emailing them since. The rest of the day was great. The rest of the event was great. And now I'm back here. I hadn't thought about this at all until I saw the article that said reporter was writing, and it clicked. Like, oh, no wonder there were some FinCon police in the mix, right? So this article titled "Why the World of Personal Finance Needs More Politics" was written by the Washington Post by a lady named Helene Olin. Now, she's an opinion writer, and this is an opinion, and this is my opinion. Not saying that any opinion's wrong, this is just my opinion. So I start reading through this article, curious, because now I've put 2 and 2 together, like, man, this is interesting. What could this article be about? And I come to this paragraph, which just really kind of strikes me. It says, "Spending a few days at FinCon 2019 shows the limits of non-political approach to improving your financial life." And then there's a lot of other stuff in there. And it essentially says, over and over again, the systemic problems facing America are simply accepted as given and unfixable and tossed back onto the individual for him or her to solve. Now, I will not totally disagree with you that they might be tossed back on the individual for them to solve. But where we differ here is immediately in the fact that I don't think this is a bad thing. She is essentially saying that telling you to take charge of your finances isn't going to work because it's not your job and it's not your fault. It's someone else's fault. And that very line, tossed back onto the individual, like that's a bad thing, that just sets the tone for this entire article to be about victimizing the reader and saying, "Oh man, I have an excuse because I'm a victim." And that mentality is never going to help you get anywhere. Another example says, "A session on retirement planning discusses common obstacles cutting into millennial finances. The surging cost of childcare, student loans, employers relying on contract employees, lack of health insurance, without any political context for why any of those obstacles are there. As a result, one speaker says savings is really just on the people. No one appears to doubt this." Newsflash, guys. Savings is really just on the people. If you spend your money on nice watches, look, I have a nice watch. I spent money on this. But I'm not going to complain that I didn't get paid enough because I spent money on this. It was a decision. If you buy nice shoes and nice watches and nice cars and nice houses and nice, I don't know, fancy ass pizza or something, it's a decision. And you chose not to save when you made that decision. So don't try to think that it's not on the individual, but we will continue. Now, she introduces in the beginning of her article a Nicole Diker, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, who she ran into, who used to write for the website Billfold. And then later in the article, she quotes Diker, or Deeker, if there's a meetup for frugal living, why isn't there a meetup for democratic socialism? I'm not going to dig into why or why not I believe democratic socialism should be at a personal finance event, but I will say that socialism is not very personal finance, so I don't think they go hand in hand. She then quotes Andy Hill, the founder of the personal finance blog and podcast, Marriage, Kids, and Money, in a negative light. Now, I have actually been quoted on Andy's podcast in regards to real estate investing, and I'm a fan. She says that he tells her college debt is a major concern for his audience, but when she asks him whether he's paying attention to the discussion, his response is, it doesn't come up often because I think being empowered to make your own decisions outside of what the government may or may not do is more important than what happens in the news. Now remember, she quotes this in a negative light, that Andy is essentially saying, I want to empower my audience to help themselves. I don't think that's negative. I think, again, we are trying to victimize the people so that they do not feel like it is their responsibility to help their situation. Now, I'm not going to say it's entirely their fault and they should be entirely responsible for fixing everything. There are issues. But when you take away any responsibility by allowing someone to be a victim, you're essentially handcuffing them to not try at all. Now, there's a long paragraph here where she kind of summarizes all this, but the last line here is really important to me. It says, if personal finance could fix this one by one for more than 300 million Americans, we would know by now. I think we do know that by now, though. Because, I mean, even at FinCon, there were like 2,500 people there, a lot of which are financially free on their own. And I know tons of people who have managed to retire early, or just only have to work on what they want to work on without the government making it possible for them. They took action and they made it happen. So I disagree with the idea that personal finance can't be fixed one by one. Now, there are things that might need group solutions, but to say again that the victim should not even try, that's akin to saying, that guy's in quicksand. Man, I have a rope. Rather than me throwing it to them so they can kind of help themselves out, I'm just going to say, bummer, dude. You're in quicksand. That sucks. How does that help anyone? The victim is just going to slowly drown in debt or sand when there are ways to help them help themselves. Just a sidebar here, in the Read More section, she also wrote an article titled, Federal Workers Don't Need Financial Advice, They Need a Paycheck. And this article is entirely about in January when the Coast Guard wasn't going to get paid, basically saying, yeah. They don't need any responsibility, they just need a paycheck. Now, I will not say that they shouldn't have been paid. Yes, they obviously should have been paid, but if you saw my video in January, this is not the first time this has happened to the federal government, and yet nobody fixes their finances. So if you have an emergency fund, and if you get your finances in check, the government has to stop paying you for 3 weeks, which they will back pay you, you're okay. But what happens is nobody worries about their finances, and then if or when the government has an issue, you're not okay. So if you take the responsibility to make sure you're set up for success, when there's a speed bump like that you can't control, it's not going to derail you. But if you are the victim, that's going to ruin you. So here I am thinking, man, I've got to do a rebuttal to this article. There has got to be a way for me to bring up my opinion on it. And then on Facebook, I see that J.D. Roth with Get Rich Slowly has already written an article, over 3,000 words, I believe, discussing this. Now, if you don't know who J.D. Roth is, he's kind of like a godfather of in the FinCon community, right? He has been blogging for a long time. In fact, I think this blog's been up since 2006. And honestly, JD's one of those people that, I've never even really sat down and talked to. So JD, if you're watching this next year at FinCon, we got to chat. Not because I don't want to talk to him, but the man is just busy. And, we have different priorities at FinCon. There's so many people. We've just never really crossed paths. That being said, I know exactly who he is because he's kind of a big deal in the personal finance blogger world. And who wouldn't love somebody who uses a Taylor Swift gif like this? I just want to quickly highlight some of the comments that JD made, and then I'm going to wrap this up with my comment. Now, JD said if he were to write an article bemoaning the state of student loan debt in the United States, it wouldn't solve anything. I would just be adding to the noise. If we're at FinCon and we hold a panel discussion on student loan debt, we wouldn't solve anything. We'd just be adding to the noise. He says, frankly, it worries him that Olin believes we should be adding to the noise instead of offering readers tools and solutions that they can apply to their individual circumstances. I agree completely. This is why I don't watch the news much, and I unfollow a lot of negative Nancy news on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, because that noise does not solve anything. If anything, it just gets you frustrated, which is even less productive than not knowing it exists. He uses a great analogy from his buddy Jim Wang. He says, a doctor's job is to maintain and restore the health of her patients. It is not a doctor's job to battle insurance companies or the pharmaceutical industry. She may have concerns about these aspects of the medical industrial complex, and she may have a deep desire to see things change. But changing the system isn't why she spent 15 plus years in higher education. She did that so that she could improve the lives of her individual patients. Again, not to say there aren't subjects in the political realm that we think there could be solutions to. I can't really do anything but add to the noise. And it's not worth adding to the noise. But I can help you improve your finances. And that's what I want to do. JD brings up a point about how diverse FinCon is. And rather than reading the entire point, I just want to point out that this is one of the reasons I like the military. So he talks about how diverse this community is, almost like a small American ecosystem. And yet there's no politics involved. So everybody gets along and they all respect each other. And they just don't feel the need to share each other's opinions and talk each other off a ledge. The military is very much the same. We don't discuss politics. And as such, a white Midwestern male can have a totally normal conversation with a non-white, non-Midwestern female without any regard to Democratic, Republican, Socialist, whatever, because we're being professional and there's a mutual respect. And there is something very, very appeasing about what happens when you leave the political realm out of the world. That noise, which is really just noise, it's not fun. Now, he sums this up perfectly where he says, ultimately what bugs me most about Olin's argument is this. By trying to convince readers that societal and systemic issues are too large and too powerful, she strips the individuals of agency. She denies them the ability and power to change their own lives. She encourages a passive, reactive mindset instead of an active, proactive point of view. This is exactly what I've been talking about. Be proactive, not reactive. Reactive is when you sit back, you go, oh, woe is me. I wonder what's going to happen next year. Am I going to get paid? I don't know. What if I don't get paid? I don't know. Proactive is where you say, I'm going to set aside this much money for my emergency fund, this much money to pay off my debt, this much money to invest, this much money to increase my emergency fund, this much money to increase my child's 529 plan, this much money to do this. And you take control of the situation so that if something terrible happens, you won't have to worry. I just want to flash this up on the chart here. He shows a really cool diagram about how reactive people act and how proactive people act. And this is the issue here. If you haven't read Jocko Willink's book on extreme ownership, do it. But if you take extreme ownership of your situation and you be proactive, like just imagine how much better your life's going to be. Look at this diagram. And then he wrapped it all up with this Venn diagram, which just made me laugh because politics is this big circle and personal finance is this smaller sphere. And there's like the overlapping. And Olin wants more of the overlap and JD does not. And frankly, neither do I. So does the Washington Post want you to stay poor? I don't think so. But whether they want you to stay poor or not, by giving you the permission to give up and make excuses and not requiring you to feel the need to take action, they are knowingly or unknowingly, allowing you an escape. It's no longer your fault because it's the government's fault. Therefore, you no longer have to try because you can't do anything. It's on the government. And therefore, you can sit around and gripe, complain, bitch, moan about how terrible Uncle Sam or Donald Trump or Barack Obama or whoever is, rather than just taking ownership of how you can fix things in your life. Are there political issues that need to be solved? Absolutely. There's always political issues that need to be solved. Is it worth taking a conference designed around finance and helping people and adding politics to the mix? I do not believe so. Because when you add the politics to the mix, those people who got along will all of a sudden be arguing. And it's not pretty. Now, a group of people talking in front of 2,000 people about Democrats versus Republicans, It's not going to help the world of personal finance. Those conversations are probably best had in one-on-one, small groups where people can be open and honest and facilitate shared information, donating and giving and gathering. JD mentioned in there that if there was a conference dedicated strictly to finance nerds trying to help with political issues, that he would be interested. And I really think that could be a good idea, but I don't think it needs to be FinCon. To wrap all this up, the original statement for the article on the Washington Post was why the world of personal finance needs more politics. And the answer? They don't. They don't need more politics. Keep the politics out of personal finance. Take ownership, make a plan, and help yourself. Then, if politics steps in to help you out, you're already better off than the guy who didn't help himself. And if politics doesn't step in to help, which who knows what the future is going to hold, but I don't think they're going to solve all of our problems in the next decade, you will be better off, right? Because you took ownership. If you try to move the needle forward for yourself and the government doesn't help, you still move the needle forward. If you sit on your butt and make excuses because it's not your fault, not your responsibility, and you're a victim, and the government doesn't move the needle forward, well, you're screwed. Right? You didn't move at all. If you made it all the way through this, comment "take charge of your finances" down below to let me know you made it through. Smash that thumbs up button and subscribe for more content. Woo! Let's see how that turned out. Doo-goo-doo-goo-doo.